In our first two installments in this series, we looked first at some fallacies in popular approaches to Revelation and at the reading cues that John himself gives us for thinking about and engaging his work. And we also looked at the public story of Roman Imperial ideology, part of that web of meanings and their daily manifestations in the thought world and the real life world of the seven cities in which John's congregations of particular interest live. In this segment, I would like to look at John's biblical critique of that public story as he seeks out the true center of the cosmos and seeks to expose the unholy scam. John in Revelation tells an alternative story to the public story. He tells the story of the one God, the creator of heaven and earth, and that God's past and future interventions in human history. John's story is the story of the Scriptures. He has grounded himself so fully and fervently in the traditional revelations about God, God's character, and God's vision for human community, that he speaks from beginning to end in the idiom and images and language of these Scriptures. He cannot help but see the world through the lens of that tradition, and his revelation extends an invitation to the churches in Asia Minor to see their local setting and their world through the lens of the scriptural revelation of God as well, to see their landscape anew in the light of God and of the Lamb. John selected particularly the landmarks of Rome, her emperors, and the religious legitimation of Roman imperialism from the landscape of first-century Roman Asia for special examination through his apocalyptic lens. Roman imperialism, with its seductive economy and blasphemous imperial cult, is a primary challenge to Christian faith and witness, as John identifies these challenges in Revelation 4 through 22. The Christians in Roman Asia Minor did not have to look beyond their own cities to see what John was talking about, and to understand Revelation as a radical unmasking of the world around them, with all of its challenges and its temptations. What then does Roman Asia and the larger Roman world look like under the light of the sacred tradition and the light of the character of the one God who created all that is and is coming in judgment upon all that is? To answer this, we need to start where John does, which is not with things earthly, but with things heavenly. For the focal point of the cosmos, the center from which all things are to be measured, is not in Ephesus or Pergamum, where our congregations live and move and go about their daily business, nor is the center of the cosmos in Rome, where the great power brokers and shapers of the political scene wield their influence, but in the realm beyond ours. John's visions begin at the center of John's universe, at the very throne of God. The way John unfolds his vision of the cosmos is rhetorically significant. Many modern readers jump to the dragon and the beasts as the focal point of interest. But for John, the key figures in this drama are not the bad guys. God and the Lamb, not the beast, occupy center stage. This is in itself an attack on Roman imperial ideology, which depicted Rome, the emperor, and the gods which gave him his power, at the center of the conceptual universe. John opens his unveiling, his apocalypse, with a vision of perfect order, with all created beings in concentric spheres looking in toward the true center of the cosmos, worshiping God and the Lamb as they deserve. God sits enthroned, surrounded by a variety of angelic orders, centered on this God and his anointed one in worship. The ripples of praise extend in ever-widening circles to include every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, as John puts it in Revelation 5:13. If there is a true universal consent, it upholds not the reign of the emperors, but the reign of the God of Israel, the Creator who has given the very gift of existence to all that is, and to this God's Messiah. It quickly becomes clear that this vision of the perfectly ordered cosmos is a vision of the way things ought to be, not the way things are in every corner of the cosmos. When, with John, we look away from the center back towards the earth again, we see who the deviant people are more clearly. There are some who are bucking against the universal consensus that acknowledges the reign of God and the Lamb. There are significant pockets of rebellion against the divine order, as certain people, faced with the proclamation about this one God and even the experience of this God's judgment, refuse to repent of the work of their hands, or give up worshipping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. John pulls off quite a coup. The vast majority of people living around the Mediterranean basin worshipped multiple gods and goddesses, almost always incorporating idols as visible representations of their deities into their worship rites and worship areas. The cults of Rome and the emperors in particular invoked a mental picture for the worshippers in which Rome was the center of the universe, as the center of power in the Mediterranean. Jews and Christians were the deviant minorities, turning away from such cultic centers to perform their own rites to their tribal god in the conceptual margins of the city. In John's vision, however, the worshippers of idols are the deviant minority. The hosts of heaven, in countless number, recognize the true center of the cosmos, and the minority Christian groups are attuned to this order. Those who worship the Greco-Roman divinities are the ones looking in the wrong directions around false centers, aligned with demons, the associates of Satan, the archenemy of God and of the cosmic order. The dramatic action of Revelation focuses on how the forces from the heavenly center break into and overrun the realities around the seven congregations. John narrates a future in which everything that is out of order is set back in order vis-a-vis the centrality of God and the Lamb and their just requirements, or else eliminated by virtue of being deposited in the receptacle of the lake of fire if it resists being brought back into line. When John takes us to look even closer into the activity of the world in rebellion against God, we see a movement afoot to steal away the worship due the one God and to draw as many people as possible into a lie that leads them away from the true center. John thoroughly dismantles the dominant culture's story. From the point of view of the throne of the one God and his Christ, Roman power, the emperor, and the worship offered to both everywhere look quite different. Indeed, by having directed his church's awe and gratitude back toward the Creator God and the Redeemer Lamb, the genuine Savior and Son of the Divine, John laid the groundwork for evoking appropriate indignation against the pretensions of promoters of the cult of Rome and the emperors in these later visions of Revelation. First, in Revelation 12-13, John completely rewrites the ideology of the head of empire. John takes the four beasts of Daniel 7, representing in sequence the kingdoms of Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Alexander's successors, and combines them into a single unholy hybrid to represent Roman rule and Rome's heads of state. Roman imperialism brings together all that the previous empires had contained in terms of geography, power, and bestial corruption. The unnatural animal imagery hides the humanness of the emperor and negates any legitimate claims he might have to the gratitude or loyalty of the audiences. The Augusti appear as a monstrous aberration. the character and rule of Rome's emperors is something out of all harmony with the divine and natural orders. The beast's origins are also not what the public story claims. The rule of the Augusti does not spring from some benign providence seeking to order human life well, but from the failing rebellion of Satan, the source of all chaos and disorder against God. It stood upon the shore of the sea, John writes, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. The dragon gave it his power, throne, and great authority. Where the Christians' neighbors would accept that Zeus gave the emperors their authority, John draws upon the conviction that the worship given to idols is given in actuality to demonic forces, with Zeus as their chief. Therefore, Satan ultimately stands behind Roman power. The emperors themselves are not pious figures or mediators of divine favor, as the public image of them declares. Rather, they are founts of blasphemy against God, as John claims in Revelation 13, 1, 5, and 6. The emperor's divine titles, typically including son of a god, Divi Filius, son of a deified Augustus, are illegitimate, the names of blasphemy that offend the Most High. Flattering courtiers in Rome and local authorities in Asia Minor addressed their emperors as Lord and God. What was for most of Asia Minor a matter of gratitude and welcome security was for John an insult to the one Lord and one God in the highest degree. John challenges the public story that Augustus received power to rule by universal consent in response to his beneficence and investment of himself in the public good. In John's presentation, the whole earth indeed marveled at the beast and worshipped the dragon and worshipped the beast, but they did so because of its military power. Who is like the beast, and who can make war against it? The Lamb's authority is acknowledged in Revelation by universal consent on the more virtuous basis of his other-centered sacrifice. The emperors received and maintained authority on the basis of their use of violence as a mechanism for unifying multiple peoples, languages, nations, and tribes into empire. The beast and Satan, God's enemies and rivals of the Lamb for sway over humankind, enjoy what they do not deserve, namely worship. John uses parody to highlight the counterfeit nature of the worship going on all around the churches. The beast worshippers ask, "Who is like the beast?" A rhetorical question implying that there is no one equal to this great and powerful being. Throughout the scriptures, however, John's audience would have encountered this same rhetorical question, but asked in regard to the one God. "Who is like you among the gods, Lord? Who is like you, glorified among the holy ones?" Or in the Psalms, "Lord, who is like you? O God, who is like you?" The inhabitants of the earth acclaim the beast, using a phrase stolen from the worship of God, just as the worship offered to the beast and the dragon is worship stolen from the God to whom it is uniquely due as creator of all that is. In parody of Christ's legitimate bringing together of a people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation, Revelation 5:9, the beast from the sea seeks to exercise rule over the members of every tribe and people and language and nation, Revelation 13:7. The imperial cult was indeed a powerful tool for unifying many different people groups under the aegis of Rome. A second local beast organizes religious cult for the first beast, making the worship of the beast a requirement for continued economic and physical well-being. I saw another beast coming up from the earth. It makes the earth and those who live in it worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. It told those who live on earth to make an image for the beast who had been wounded by the sword and yet came to life again. It forces everyone the small and the great, the rich and poor, the free and slaves, to have a mark put on their right hand or on their forehead. It will not allow anyone to purchase or sell anything unless the person has the mark with the beast's name or the number of its name. The majority view the imperial cult as a pious response of gratitude toward the great benefactor, something freely, even enthusiastically and rightly offered to the one seated upon the throne in Rome. John sees it as an imposition from those in power, giving poignant expression to the pressures Christians felt and would soon feel all the more. The ultimate recipient of such cult is the dragon, the enemy of God, whose worship is linked to that of the beast in Revelation 13:4, even as the cults of the traditional gods were frequently linked to the imperial cult. All the earth marveled after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, because he gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast. In John's understanding, it is not the Christians who act seditiously by withdrawing from participation in the cults of Rome and the Roman gods, but the supporters of Rome who rebel against the rule of the Most High God and his anointed. The only kind of person who could participate in such cults is a person whose name hadn't been written from the time the earth was made in the scroll of life of the Lamb who was slain, according to Revelation 13:8. John also uses Nero as a kind of symbol to characterize the principate. While the mortal wound affects the beast as a whole, and not merely one of its heads, see Revelation 13:3, 12, and 14, the sword blow to one of its heads cannot help but recall Nero's suicide. The detail that a future head will come, in fact, from one of those that have fallen is perhaps the clearest echo of the popular legend of Nero come back from the dead in the book that is found in Revelation 17:11. But Nero is not merely one aberrant head among others. He gives the beast its essential character. When John comes to the topic of the beast's number, he says, "This calls for wisdom. Let the one who understands calculate the beast's number, for it's a human being's number. Its number is 666, Revelation 13:18. Latin, Greek, and Hebrew all use letters to represent not only sounds, but also numerals. When John identifies the number of the beast's name as 666, he is inviting his audiences to figure out whose name has letters that, taken as their numerical equivalents, add up to 666. In my opinion, not mine only, but that of a great many scholars, the best solution remains Nero Caesar, as written and added up in Hebrew. The reason I find this solution particularly persuasive is because there is an early Christian variant to Revelation 13:18, which gives the number 616. And it is very easy to see how two different ways of spelling Nero, transliterating Nero into Hebrew, one following the Latin version of his name, simply Nero, one following the Greek version of his name, Neron, could lead to this variant, whether it be 666, Neron Caesar, or 616, Nero Caesar. John invites the hearers thus to see in Nero, and in Nero's distinctive persecution of Roman Christians and their leaders, the true character of the Principate, bare, exposed in all its ugliness and its opposition to the reign of Christ. In this subversive portrait, John also exposes the Pax Romana and Pax Augusti to be bald-faced lies. He does not allow his hearers to ignore the fact that a great deal of violence has gone into creating and sustaining empire, for example, in the brutal suppression of the Jewish revolt. How is it truly a matter of peace if you use overwhelming force to subdue a country that never wished to be a part of your empire in the first place? The Pax Romana in fact, is a time of making war with the saints, as John puts it in Revelation 13:7, or making war with the witnesses of Jesus, conquering and killing them in 11 verse 7. The souls of Christian martyrs cry out for justice. While it is unlikely that Revelation was written during a period of open persecution, the memory of the Christian holocausts in Rome, as well as more local and individual actions against Christians such as Antipas, reflected in Revelation 2:13, has not dissipated in John's mind. Roman rule is the rule of violence, spilling not only the blood of holy ones and the witnesses of Jesus, Revelation 17:6, but also the blood of all those who had been slain upon the earth, Revelation 18:23-24. It is a time in which those destined for slaughter by the sword and for captivity meet their destiny, Revelation 13:10. Moreover, the guardians of the so-called Roman peace are the pawns of Satan, deployed as part of a last-ditch effort within a losing cosmic revolt. This portrait of a world, indeed a cosmos, at war, evokes an attitude of resistance against the forces that John places in the enemy's camp, steering the audience away from cooperation and compromise. And what of Roma Aeterna, eternal Rome, the beneficent goddess whose worship was everywhere yoked to the cult of the emperor? John creates one of the most memorable and negative pictures of Rome in extant literature. He tells a very different story about the mission and the destiny of Roma Aeterna from the one heard in Virgil's Aeneid, or Plutarch's essay on the fortune or destiny of Rome. First, he presents the goddess Roma in a very different dress. No longer wearing the modest toga of the goddess worshipped in the Temple of Rome, nor her austere military garb. Here, in Revelation, she's dressed in her evening wear, sporting the lingerie of a self-employed courtesan and plying her trade with the utmost success. Her impact on the civilized world is entirely negative. Her resume includes plundering the wealth of the provinces to satisfy her taste for luxury, murdering countless holy ones, witnesses to Jesus and others who have dissented against or hindered her practices, and seducing the leaders of the inhabited world into forming unholy alliances to promote their collective, self-indulgent practices. There is nothing here of Roma as the chosen vessel by means of which providence renews a golden age. Rather, her cup is full of abominations and the unclean residue of Rome's fornication. John helps his audiences to look at Rome and Roman imperialism especially through the lens of the Hebrew prophets, who had long ago spoken against the self-serving practices of empire as contrary to God's goodwill for human beings in every nation. In particular, he accuses Rome of violence against dissenters, especially against Jews and Christians, economic exploitation, nurturing a system that caters to the luxury of the powerful at the expense of the many, and idolatrous presumption in its claims on its own behalf. John develops each of these in such a way as to arouse indignation against Roman imperialism, supporting his call to Christians to keep themselves free from supporting or participating in such an unjust system of domination. John gives attention throughout Revelation to Rome's violence, refusing to allow the public rhetoric of peace or stability to mask the violence with which that peace has been forged and continues to be maintained. The mother of whores is drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. She is responsible for the blood of prophets and of saints and of all those who have been slaughtered on the earth. Again, Revelation 17:6 and 18:24. This very fact necessitates divine vengeance upon Rome, just as it did upon historic Babylon. Empire is forged out of conquest. A few territories, came under Roman control peaceably, as did notably Asia Minor. More, however, were taken by military force rather than received. Coins bearing the inscription Asia Recepta commemorate Asia Minor's peaceful submission to Roman rule. This stands in stark contrast to coins celebrating the taking of Egypt or the taking of Armenia, both under Augustus, or the taking of Parthia under Trajan in the early 2nd century, or the retaking of Judea, commemorating the suppression of the first Jewish revolt under Vespasian and Titus. Such conquests came with heavy casualties. John's scenes of blood-filling valleys and of endless flocks of carrion birds gathering to feast upon the flesh of kings and soldiers are not products merely of apocalyptic imagination, but were available to be seen throughout John's lifetime. Even a man as highly placed in the empire as the Roman senator and historian Cornelius Tacitus could see what Rome looked like from the outside. Imagining how a German chieftain would have commented on the advancing Roman army, he writes, "To violence, rapine, and plunder they give the name government. They make a desert and call it peace." John criticizes the Roman imperial economy as a system of self-interest structured chiefly to benefit Rome. The elites and inhabitants of Rome consumed disproportionate wealth and goods, in great measure to indulge excessive desires and cravings, what John calls luxury in Revelation 18, verses 3 and 7, while the poor in Rome's provinces were often short even on the necessities of life. The gaudiness of the great prostitute, draped in luxurious clothing, purple and scarlet, richly adorned, gold and precious stones and pearls, and sporting luxury goods, not just a cup, but a golden cup, all this in Revelation 17:4, highlights the visceral commitment to excess and self-indulgence that John saw in the Roman economy. He captures it again in his focus on the extensive cargoes flowing from the ports throughout the known world, taking both staples like grain and oil and luxury items away from the provinces where they are produced to satiate a single city's cravings. Revelation 18:12-13. We should remember that part of what Rome enjoyed came to her by way of trade, but another large part came by way of tribute, the enormous sums of money that each province collected and sent to Rome for the support of Rome's army, Rome's empire-wide building and military operations, and Rome's lifestyle. The Roman economy included the provision of free grain and oil for the city of Rome's 200,000 families on the dole, a perk of living in the capital of the empire. As John watches the cargoes of wine and oil and fine flour and grain streaming toward Rome, he watches the prices of staples like barley and wheat rise in the provinces where the grains are grown. Rome purchased these grains inexpensively from the provinces at fixed minimum quantities and at fixed prices. This meant that the residents of the provinces often had to pay inflated prices for the insufficient amounts of grain that were left, and in times of shortage went without. The situation was made worse as local landowners used more and more of their land to produce crops that brought in a better financial yield per arable acre. Market demands made the production of oil and wine far more attractive, often leading to scarcity in the essentials of wheat and barley in the provinces. Revelation 6:5-6 reflects a situation in which the prices of staples are grossly inflated, while production of oil and wine proceeds unabated. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." So I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a balance for weighing in his hand. I heard what sounded like a voice from among the four living creatures. It said, "A quart of wheat for a denarion, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarion. But don't damage the olive oil and the wine." John calls attention to the parasitic side of the Roman imperial economy, countering any feelings of gratitude toward Rome by drawing attention to the pervasive self-interest that underlies Roman rule, even nurturing indignation as Rome is seen to consume more of the world's goods than is the share of any one city, enjoying more than is due, and this often to the detriment of the provinces. If Rome brings prosperity, she does so only to the merchants and shipmasters and others who profit or profiteer as they direct the world's wealth and resources to her ravenous maw. The Roman economy was furthermore built and maintained upon the back of slaves, humans sufficiently dehumanized to be spoken of as simply bodies, or, in Aristotle's infamous phrase, living tools. Approximately 1/4 of the population of the empire was enslaved. While slaves lived under conditions that ran the gamut from desperate to luxurious, they shared this basic definition and the vulnerability it implied for their identity and security as persons. John draws attention to this facet of the Roman economy, indeed its bedrock, by listing bodies, that is, human slaves, in the inventory of the cargo that streams toward Rome from every quadrant of the Orbis Terrarum. In his list of 28 items in Revelation 18:12-13, John has given bodies, what's translated slaves in this translation, but more literally, the word in Greek is here somata, bodies, even human souls. He has given this word bodies the climactic position by placing it last, and also by giving it an explanatory gloss. The Roman economy also undermined resistance to Roman domination among non-Roman elites by cultivating a desire in them for what Rome has and can provide for her willing partners. John may have this in mind as he speaks of the great whore seducing the inhabitants and the kings of the earth. The Roman historian Tacitus, again, writing perhaps only a decade after John, attested to the fact that growing fond of and accustomed to the luxury goods and entertainments introduced with the Roman presence, undermined resistance to Roman rule. As he writes his histories, he imagines a general among the North German tribes exhorting his people thus: "Away with those pleasures which give the Romans more power over their subjects than their arms bestow." The Romans might strategically introduce luxury items and offer the privilege of Greek and Roman education for the children of local elites in places where there was resistance, in order to achieve by such seduction what force could not achieve as efficiently. The wealth to be enjoyed by participating in the larger global economy was, as far as John was concerned, a dangerous lure toward sharing in the violence and political injustice that undergirded such an economy, as well as sharing in the economic injustice that allowed the resources and produce of the provinces to be siphoned off to satisfy the immoderate cravings of Rome's inhabitants and her worldwide elite partners. John understood long before the modern era that a person cannot share in the profits of domination without also sharing in responsibility for its crimes. "Come out of her, my people, so that you don't partake in her sins and don't receive any of her plagues." And of course, Rome claimed honor beyond what was rightly hers to claim. And the cult of the goddess Roma would have been an especially egregious offense in John's eyes. Related to this charge is the presumption inherent in the public discourse about Rome as the eternal city, Roma Aeterna, claiming for Rome what has never belonged to any kingdom or empire before her. In her heart she says, I sit like a queen. I'm not a widow. I'll never see grief. This is why her plagues will come in a single day, deadly disease, grief, and hunger. She will be consumed by fire because the Lord God who judges her is powerful. Revelation 18, 7-8. Such arrogance signals Rome's refusal to apply the lessons of history to a more humble and humane rule on her part. John knows a God who allots to all kingdoms their times and seasons, and history has never known a kingdom that has failed to fall from its height into obscurity and subjugation to other kingdoms. God intervenes to bring low those rulers or empires that forget and affront God's sovereign oversight. Rome's claims about its divinity and destiny are textbook examples of the arrogant presumption of imperialistic thinking. John exposes these pretensions in his vision of Rome's demise, which will reveal the hollowness of Rome's claims in favor of the persistent truth that all human domination systems run their course. Every seat of empire, no matter how prosperous and powerful at its peak, will one day sit as a ruin, and Rome will be no different. Revelation 18:2. The eternal city stands under God's imminent judgment, sentenced already to destruction for her crimes against apostles, saints, and prophets, and will surely go up in smoke and be laid desolate, rather than live up to its claims for itself. The scene of the great prostitute, stripped, naked, devoured by her allies, and burnt up, Revelation 17, 16-17, is John's final answer to Rome's self-glorifying propaganda, leaving Roma Aeterna fully exposed in the light of Scripture and in the light of the God whom Scripture proclaims.